Good morning. Well, we're just in front of my house now in a normal suburban neighborhood, you know, in Etobicoke, and I'm just going to show you around my house different plants and landscaping that we put into place and the weeds that naturally grow. You'll see my unorganized gardens that are just natural, and how we can survive and live off the land here in a very simple neighborhood with very little resources, not like the farm yesterday where you see a lot of land and space, but I'm showing you both scenarios, and you'll see things that I've been doing. And basically, before I bought that farm, I was just doing most of it in this area here. I started 14 years ago, growing a lot of stuff myself and propagating and organizing so that I could survive and make my grocery bill $30 a week or less, which I've been doing for years now. You can see this little plant here that's very tiny, and it's sage. It's just a little sage plant. But that tiny little plant gives me enough medicinal property of the sage plant. I pick it up, you know, every once in a while, and I put it in my mouth, and I chew it. It's a great tasting spice. It's very good for your gums and your teeth. It's been historically documented from Italy and around the world that old people in different cultures eat this on a regular basis to heal the gums and the lining of your teeth. We have, you know, this is a European style yarrow. The North American version of yarrow is white all the time. This European yarrow grows here as well, and European people recognized yarrow as a medicinal plant, and so did my native culture. Native culture in North America use yarrow. My grandmother taught me its importance when I was a child. Growing up, whenever we got a cold or a flu, or we were sick from sliding outside down the hills in the snow, we'd come in and our clothes were soaking wet, and you'd start sniffling and running nose. My grandmother always had a metal can in one of her cupboards in her simple little cement house, you know, that she lived on the side of Highway 17 in Northern Ontario. She always had a cupboard with a can of this in it. When we go picking blueberries up north, she would always grab a few branches like this, and she would just break them off. She wouldn't kill the whole plant. She'd take just a few, and she'd find somewhere else a few more, and she'd roll it up in a ball, just roll it up around and stick it in her apron. And when we got to her house or my parents' house, she would just leave it to dry, and she'd stick it in a metal can after 3 or 4 days when it was dry enough, kind of crispy, and leave it there in the cupboard, in the top of the cupboard. And anytime somebody got sick, this went into boiling water. It was boiled like tea, and a few tablespoons of it was stuck in your mouth. Not pleasant tasting, it's nasty tasting actually, but it was a great medicinal remedy to get rid of your cold or flu. And here's a small little plant. It has a fuzzy little ear like a lamb. I call it lamb's quarters, but it's not what the traditional lamb's quarters. It's a flower. It's smooth like a velvet. You know, Marcus, if you even want to touch it, you can try it yourself. It's just very smooth to touch. And you'll see that it spreads, and it's got some other little ones over there. There's one here. In the springtime, this really doesn't die. This will stay kind of greenish colored, like this color. Even in the wintertime, it'll kind of dry up or whatever, but in the springtime, it'll come back to life. And in the springtime, I love to cut these little petals off, and I throw them in a stir fry with onions and potatoes. I just love to eat this with onions and potatoes. This is the spiderwort. Now you can see it's all closed up. Well, around my backyard we might find some that have little flowers. It makes these little seeds. Now I've never consumed the leaves, but I love to eat these flowers in a salad. And you cannot mistake this flower at all, the spiderwort, because it grows like this shape leaves, and it has these little pods. And when it flowers, it's a purple flower with a small little yellow sprig in it, and it's got 3 points on it like a star, like a 3-pointed star. And once you plant one spiderwort plant around your house, You know, you can see how it spreads so quickly, and it spreads by rhizome and by seed. And the bees, you'll notice this plant, when it starts to flower in the springtime, it's one of the first things that start flowering. As it opens up in the morning, you can get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. As the sun's shining on it, the bees are on it right away, collecting the pollen from it. And the bees are telling you 100% that it is something that is necessary for them to exist. So I love to come out in the morning and just pick the flowers off fresh. They almost taste like a drop of dew. They just have this wet, silky taste to them, and I just love eating it. I could sit there and eat, you know, all the flowers off a plant. I try not to do that. I leave some for the bees, but. And you see here's our Queen Anne's lace, a wild carrot growing right here. You know, just sitting here. I mean, I don't pull them out. I just let them grow. If someone's looking around, for example, you see, my lawn is not a manicured lawn compared to some of my neighbors around the neighborhood. I mean, they don't have it. They have a manicured lawn. They're putting the chemicals down and they're just trying to grow grass. You can see in my lawn we have clover. This small clover growing everywhere, and we've got plantain and we've got dandelions growing, and to me this is the way your lawn should absolutely be. It's just natural. It's not being, you know, we cut the grass, trim it, but it's just the way it should be. It shouldn't be just one type of thing, because in the environment nothing is just one. There's not just one thing existing. It's a combination of all kinds of things. So when you take and you look at your human health or your physical health or your mental health or your spiritual health, it all is dependent on a variety of enzymes, minerals, chemicals that are complete from the environment. So if you're only eating one thing, or 15 things like the average grocery store, your body is not complete. You cannot be, I don't know how to explain it, the person you should be. Your body needs a variety. The birds that live around my neighborhood here get to eat a variety of things from my backyard and around this property. I noticed that the robins in my backyard, they might have nests in the neighbors' yards, but they fight who can have the little territory to pick the worms, because the birds know that the food in my backyard and the front yard, you know, it's not been sprayed. The insects and the animals know this. They know. They're in tune because the energy is different here. And to me, that's important because I have to live here and I want to be content and filled, right? You know, like I don't have a fancy driveway. We fill it in with stones along the edge. To me, that doesn't matter. Those things don't count. What counts, though, is how I feel, how I think, how my skin is, you know, how I'm vibrant and alive, and I can work and do things that I enjoy doing. There's the little flower we were talking about earlier. Okay, you see, this is the little flower I call lamb's quarters. Now, you see it has this beautiful little pink flower on it, a reddish pink flower. And, you know, I'm not afraid to consume this. I cook it, though, but I just love consuming this. It tastes good, just really gives you something, I don't know what, but it just gives you a good flavor when you eat it, especially when you cook it with onions and potatoes. I love it. I mean, you know, I've studied quite a few different cultures around the world, especially longevity, like, you know, of the Okinawan Islands. And the Okinawan Islands have a really, really varied diet where they're eating a lot of fish, they're growing their own food, their own vegetables on a regular basis. And, you know, when they move from the Okinawan Islands to Japan themselves, or they move somewhere else, it seems like their lifespan is cut down quite a bit. But when they're doing stuff the way they did naturally, where they're making fermented foods, where they're eating regular amounts of fish, where they're you know, eating their own vegetables and a lot of wild stuff, you know, the Japanese government will not pay an Okinawan person till they reach their golden years, 95 years or older, then they get a pension. So, you know, you have to look at some of these things and examine them and say, well, you know, what are they doing that's enhancing their health so much? And when you listen to documentaries, like I've seen documentaries that different CBC has done, and you know, as a national television broadcast system, when they did interviews with these old Okinawan peoples, the women and the men, one of the things they all said, you know, what's your secret to longevity? And they all said, we do it God's way. They all say the same thing. They're doing it naturally, God's way. And you know, I've heard that so many times from looking at this stuff. And you know, you listen to certain people that have examined the blue zones, for example, with Dr. Oz on TV, who is currently on TV now. You know, and he has these different people have written these books about these blue zones. You look at these people, they basically consume and eat food in their local area within a mile of where they live. They do everything natural. They all eat some form of fermented food. They all do. They all eat a little bit of protein. They all eat fresh vegetables. They all grow some food of themselves, and they all basically don't go to a gym to work out. They're working in their garden. They're touching the earth. They're being grounded to the earth. They're working with their plants and stuff around them. And because they're doing this kind of stuff, there's got to be some secret. They seem to be very relaxed, very peaceful, very balanced, very intelligent, and they live a long time with no disease. So to me, there has to be something to it, more than what people just assume. And I noticed from the time I started really taking my life seriously and doing this seriously about taking care of my environment, growing my own food, existing off the land, my health has improved like I can't explain. You know, like it takes a lot. I can work an 18-hour day now, where 10 years ago I had trouble to do that, you know, as I was improving. You can see we kind of have a natural looking lawn between the neighbor and myself. It's, you know, not something that is manicured. We manicure it to an extent, cutting down some of the things and changing it, right, once in a while. But for example, you see in here this little shiny, little hard leaf plant tree that's growing. Now, it makes flowers that are blue in the springtime, and I like to eat the flowers from it. Periwinkle flowers are edible. I don't know what else I can do with the plant, but I love to throw those bright blue flowers in my salad. And they start early in the springtime. They taste very good. Just enhances the dandelions. You can see the strawberries we've let grow wild. They're just running around in here every once in a while. And so in the springtime, when strawberries are in season, they naturally grow, and we pick out a few strawberries and we have them, you know, in a smoothie, or we eat them fresh right off the vine. And you can see the yarrow is growing up all over the place, just in patches, you know, just coming along, flowering over here. This tree up here is an interesting tree that everybody needs to know about. It's one of the 7 trees in North America that stay green all the time. It's a Canada yew. The Canada yew tree, you can't eat the needles, you can't eat the bark, and you can't eat the seeds from it because they're very toxic. It's a poisonous plant in one sense because, you know, I know everybody says anything, all the pine trees, conifers, you can eat them, but this is one that you cannot. It's very recognizable because the needles are flat, opposing, and they're not picky like a spruce. See, the needles are very flat, and they're opposing. They go back and forth, and they're soft. But this is a very good medicinal tree. Tamoxifen, the cancer drug, which they use in breast cancer, is made from this tree because this tree contains Taxol. And the one thing you'll notice about this tree, if you prune it a little bit, well, we haven't done this one for a little while, but if you prune it a little bit, it'll make it produce seed, fruit. And you'll see there's will be a tiny little red berry that goes on here, and it has like a little, it was later in the summertime we'd see it, it has like a little cone shape. You can see the seed inside, and there's be a little red fruit on there. and the tree will get lots of them all over the place. And when it does, you'll see all the birds. Like I watched in Marcus in one of your videos how the birds were attacking this date palm. Well, you will see birds swarming around this tree. They'll be inside of it everywhere, and they'll be eating the flesh from that fruit. They spit the seed out. And when you see the birds on there, you want to go to this tree and taste that fruit.
The fruit's not poisonous.
The fruit is not poisonous. The seed is. And you know, just take the fruit. It's soft. It's so soft. It will just like melt off in your mouth and you spit the seed out. But I'll guarantee you, if you start eating this, you won't want to stop. It's so tasty. There's nothing you can taste like it that's so good in your mouth. It is absolutely, there's no ice cream, there's no jelly, there's no sugar, there's no honey that tastes as good as this, in my opinion. It's just something so, it's like a nice sweetness. It just melts in your mouth, and you'll find that you'll love to eat it. I do. Every time I go cut somebody's lawn, or I do some little gardening for something for someone, or help them, and I see one of these trees in fruit, I'll sit there for half an hour and just eat. The name of this plant is colt's foot. This is very good for lung infections. If you have someone with a lung problem, it's good for breathing. You make it as a medicinal tea. You can pick the leaves off, the flowers in the springtime, and dry them and make tea from it, but it's not an edible plant. Okay, we're gonna have to go through our wet grass here. As you can see, we have our grapevines here that we've planted along, and if you look in the grapevines here, they're full of grapes right now. Like, they're just loaded with grapes. See, the grapes are just packed right in. All kinds of grapes.